just to get your take on, right? So it's kind of turns out that this entire Diggs situation, with him missing camp for the first day of camp for the Bills, we do have an answer as to what apparently happened, right? And this is alleged, but there's been a few different sources that have kind of confirmed this is what went down. Diggs restructures his contract this past year. Okay, so not a money issue. Diggs also was the second most targeted receiver in all of the NFL last year. Not a playtime targeting issue. So what was it? Apparently, Diggs restructured his contract under the impression that they were going to get another star wide receiver on the opposite side of him, like Hopkins or whoever else, so that it would be impossible to, double team both guys, right? That's essentially how Diggs framed it. Bills didn't end up signing anybody. Diggs walks in and gets into it with McDermott in the front office, basically. And McDermott is actually the one who excused him from minicamp that day, not Diggs. That is a very interesting story. And people, I think, and Mark, I think your kind of first impression of that were like, oh, like they're done with Diggs, like BS, like, he's causing drama. And I can see that side of it. The other side of it is that he made a pretty selfless restructuring deal on his contract under the impression that his team was going to get better so that they could win more games. And the front office didn't do anything about that. I understand why he's upset, frankly. And so it is interesting, obviously all rumors, all hearsay, but you could see how McDermott talked about it. Like it sounded like some, they were fresh off of getting into an argument with one another. And that seems like the most likely candidate. So
it makes sense. It all makes sense. You explained that very, very well. And at the end of the day, I like you said, I think it's over with that drama, right? I think they've moved past it. I think at the end of the day, they have a common goal in Buffalo, and they know that with Josh Allen at QB, there's a window to win, right? To finally win a Super Bowl. With that dude at quarterback, you're gonna have a chance, right? And I think Diggs just needs to realize let the front office do what they do. Okay, there's only a few players in the NFL that have any sort of say in what they should do with free agency, and it ain't receivers. I'm sorry.
No, it's almost always quarterbacks. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're not a top 3 quarterback in the league, you probably shouldn't be saying anything. That's how I view it. That's what I think. Diggs is a great player. Probably a top, 6 or 7 receiver in the league. Doesn't mean he has say in who else they should go get.
Now, in Diggs' defense,
he can say something.
In Diggs' defense, what if you get approached as a receiver and you say, hey, we want to mess around with your money, your contract money a little bit so that we could go sign a superstar on the other side of you. And then they don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, but again, at the end of the day, he restructures his contract. It could be because they want to give, a defensive player more money, which they did. They Ed Oliver signed. So it's like, I wouldn't say they haven't done anything offensively besides drafting like Dalton Kincaid. They really haven't added to their offense whatsoever. And,
and their defense, their offense wasn't the issue, and their offense wasn't the thing losing them games last year. It was mostly their.
It's more, I think, scheme, line. And I think it's more scheme players, right? I mean, 49ers are, I don't think, as offensively gifted. I think they just call better plays. I think that they get the receivers open using play action better. At the end of the day, if you can't run the ball consistently with someone that isn't your quarterback, you're going to struggle. Like if the Ravens can't run the ball with their running backs and it's only Lamar, they're going to struggle.
Right.
Anyone in the league, that's how it is. I mean, you can't ask Josh Allen, like you've mentioned several times, to be Superman. He can do it maybe 3 or 4 snaps a game, but to ask him to do it over the course of an entire season, we saw what happened. He struggled with injury. He didn't look the same when it mattered most in the playoffs. And that's not fair to ask of him. It's just not. And so I think they're right there. And I think the great thing is all of this stems from just being competitive. Diggs is one of the most competitive players in the league. He wants to win. He wants to put up big numbers. He wants Josh to put up big numbers. They want to go out there and do their thing. And when he feels like maybe they're falling behind and he's seeing teams make these moves, in his mind, he thinks we're falling behind. But I think there's a bigger picture thing, that the front office might know about that maybe he doesn't know about or isn't as in the room in some of these meetings. And he just, vocally probably shouldn't be saying some of the stuff he's saying. And it's taken out of context and the media loves it. And coaches don't want. I mean, as a coach, you don't want to hear players like that. That's one of my biggest pet peeves when I'm coaching. Is and it doesn't happen often, but every once in a while, a player will suggest something, to me that's. And there's times where it's an honest suggestion and it works, and it's like, yeah, here's why we should or here's why we shouldn't do it. But there's some times where it's like, hey, maybe we should put this so and so in, and it's like, no, you don't do that conversation. That's for the coaches to do. Just do your thing. Just play. Be the best player you can be the best teammate you can be. And that fighting with your coach is not being a great teammate. Whether it's driven from,
and you're right. There's multiple sides of it. And look, it's different at the NFL level, right? Because you have egos to manage, you have $1 million contracts to manage, and all of these guys are used to being the top dog everywhere they went their entire lives, 90% of the time, right? Like that, you don't get to the NFL unless you're one of those guys. So I get that some players are going to be a little bit more opinionated and think that they're entitled to raise those opinions to a coach, because it's not like a student and an adult anymore. It's two freaking adults that are in different positions of power that they have to kind of negotiate through. So, but you're right. I think at the end of the day, look, people are going to dramatize this and say, and we definitely we're guilty of it last week, being like, all right, like Madden curse, like, here we go.
Yeah. I'm still going to say the Madden curse. I still don't
just for fun,
from our unders episode, right? I do think the Bills will be worse than they were last year.
But I think that you're right in the sense that this is stemming from a competitive drive, and you can't fault any professional athlete for wanting their team to be better, right?
I mean, you've seen Tom Brady yell at he's one of the best teammates. You ask any of his teamates, he's going to say he's one of the best teammates they've ever had. But we've seen him yelling at coaches,
into it with
yelling at players,
smashing iPad. No iPad is safe.
Peyton Manning. You've seen cut-ups of him just going in on people, players and coaches. I mean, you saw him. I saw a clip of him yelling at Jeff Saturday, his center, for a long time in Indianapolis. And it was like personal. But again, you as a player and as a competitor, you got to put that aside and go out there and realize that if Jeff Saturday doesn't do his job, there is no Peyton Manning.